We're here again with Angele from Cornwall, Ontario, and she would like to tell us a story. I actually threatened to break her arm if she wouldn't talk to me about Standing Rock.
Yeah.
So her experience with Standing Rock. Angele?
I'd like to start with what kind of led me to, not necessarily to Standing Rock, but in the direction that I've gone in. It started years ago. I was a very lost soul as a teenager, and when I finally came into my own as an adult, I went away and I joined the military. And I spent 5 years in the military, and then 8 years total on base. I fell in love and I stayed on base. And I ultimately wanted to leave the military because I had lost myself again. I knew that I was not being the woman that I should have been. I was closing her off. I was becoming so masculine and so cold. And I stopped crying, and I stopped caring, and I stopped loving. I stopped desiring children. And I couldn't recognize myself anymore when I looked in the mirror. And I wasn't strong enough to leave the partner that I was with, so I chose to just leave the military. But when you stay on base, you don't ever necessarily leave the military. And last year, I fled. I woke up one day and I could no longer take it. I couldn't take the person I was and the life I was living, and just the amount of sacrifices to my moral values that I had made to be that person in that life. And I fled, and I didn't know where to go because I've moved around so much. I wanted to find a place that really felt like my own. So I kind of bounced around for 8 months, and I had a total emotional breakdown last summer. And I was lost. I was so lost. And my gut inside me just told me to go home. And that's Cornwall. And I have a lot of trauma from my childhood in my hometown, so a lot of me was very reluctant. But I knew that the healing had to start with listening to that voice inside you, you know, the one that you do ignore a lot. And it was telling me to go home. I had to be with family. I had to learn to heal, starting with my foundation. And that was the biggest part, you know. I knew that I wasn't sure if I was ready for it, but I knew it was time to go there. Towards the end of summer, I packed up everything and I moved myself back home in a U-Haul. And once I got home, as soon as I got there, I started learning about what was going on at Standing Rock. And for me, it wasn't even about the pipeline. It was about just the abuse that was going on to the people that were there. Just the blatant ignorance, and they just ignored all of their wishes and their desires, and they just kept plowing through and doing whatever they wanted. And I felt it was so wrong, and I just moved home, and I told people how I felt and that I wanted to go, and I had a calling. And my family and my friends had kind of convinced me to not go. They said that it was still my fear driving me to run. So I took a month, and I waited, and I thought about it. And a week into it, I started dreaming. And every night I dreamt I was there. And there was no real visuals in my dream. It was always nighttime. And it was very silly things, just walking around and saying hello to the people that I knew, giving hugs, asking how people were doing, if they were well, how they felt, had they eaten, had they slept well, were they caring for themselves, were they warm, just silly little conversations. And every night I went to this place, and I sat on it for 3 weeks, and finally one day I woke up and I said, I'm going. This is not about fear, this is about where I'm supposed to be and where I'm supposed to go. And I packed up my car, brought everything. I brought my dog with me as well. And I didn't even realize it until I hopped in my car, but I was driving under the full moon in November. And it was a 3-day drive, and I was so energized by the moon that I just drove straight there, all by myself with my dog. And I got there in 2 days. I took breaks to sleep, but I couldn't sleep for more than 4 hours at a time. I would sleep for 4 hours, I would wake energized, and I would drive again. And I especially loved driving under that moon. It guided me the whole way there. And as soon as I got there, my dreams were alive, because it was like everything was foggy and dim in my dreams. You know, I couldn't actually place the scenery around me. But the second I walked around and I looked around, I knew that this is where I was roaming. Every night I was there, and it was just a beautiful experience. And to see everyone, it was both worlds in one, because there was inside the camps and amongst the people, a community has never been so kind to each other, loving and appreciative and caring. You know, when you were cooking meals, they weren't just for yourself. You knew that there was elders and there was children and everyone had to eat. So you were cooking meals for everyone to make sure everybody was cared for. So there was so much love being poured into every carrot that was cut, every soup that was made. And then the men would split wood, and there was so much appreciation for all of the labor that they did. And there was so much appreciation to the women for all the cooking and the support that they had. And it was wild because there was so much aggression and anger and hatred just outside of us. You know, we were not even a mile away from the front lines, from where DAPL was, from where the pipeline was being created. And we created this kind of bubble where we were protected inside of it, you know. And it was hard when we would leave and we would go and do prayer walks and protests. It was hard to kind of control that mixed energies, but it was so wild to see all of these things. You know, it took the worst of times to bring us together and treat each other the way we should have always been treating each other. It was beautiful, and it was so hard to come back and tell people that it was the most beautiful experience I ever had, because I was maced, I had flash grenades thrown at me, I was water cannoned for hours straight. But amongst that, things that you don't get to see were the people who were dancing and praying and totally unaffected by the chaos all around them, because they would not allow them to see the weakness. They would not allow them to let them be weak, to break them down. It was just this insane energetic field that was going on all around us. And we had fires. There was sacred fires and campfires for all the tribes that had kind of built their own little areas. And we would sit at night, and to see the openness, you know, for me, I was always a very closed off person, so it only around the closest of friends could I be honest with how I felt about certain situations or being treated certain ways. And to sit around these fires and have people come in and ask if they could speak their piece, and they would address an issue, either a personal situation or a specific thing, or just a broad sense of whatever it was that was causing them turmoil that day or that week. And they would bring it forth, and they would share it around the fire, and one by one we would all discuss the issues and talk through them, so nothing got to build inside anyone. You know, everyone was able to kind of release the concerns that were in them, and they were able to feel loved and supported. And it was so beautiful to see that sharing and all of that creation that we created together.
Now, I get a lot of response from all over the world on this documentary. So, make believe I've never been to Standing Rock. I don't know where you came from and to get there, but can you explain to us where you started from and where Standing Rock, where the people will find it?
The locations?
Yeah.
Well, I am from Cornwall, Ontario, and that's where I chose to leave from. Like I said, I traveled around for a little bit. I was uncertain, and I kind of went to Cornwall, and I created like a nest for me to return to. You know, and I made sure that I had this safe space in Cornwall. And once I had created a safe space, that I knew that I would have somewhere to come home to and discharge once I got back, because I was going alone. I didn't do any fundraising. I was so insecure with myself. I wasn't brave enough to do those things. I just knew that I had to go. I brought all the things that I owned that I could share. So I left Cornwall, and I essentially just headed west.
Well,
and
Cornwall,
south.
Cornwall is on is Canada, north of the St. Lawrence, midway of the St. Lawrence River, north of the Great Lakes.
Yeah, and if you know the U.S. at all, it's just above New York State.
Got it.
So if you go straight north from New York, then you will come up into Canada, and you will be just very close to Cornwall.
And Standing Rock is in?
It's in North Dakota.
Okay, which is central.
Yes. So I drove past Wisconsin. I don't know the states very well, so I headed west, and it was a little south. West and then just a tidge south, down into North Dakota. And the closest city is Bismarck.
North Dakota.
Yeah, Bismarck, North Dakota. And the tribe there was the Sioux tribe. It is Lakota Nation.
Yep.
So that's, we were under Lakota, we were on Lakota land, so we were respecting Lakota traditions while we were there.
And north of there, the province is?
I think it's Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan is, if you go straight north from North Dakota, you're going to come up into Saskatchewan, Canada.
Wow.
Very mid-central.
Incredible. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you for allowing me to share this story.